Good day and welcome to New Generation Man by Shegun Bash. I'm excited that you're tuned in into our channel again for another exciting episode. New Generation Man is a platform where we try to bring on guests and people to speak about their experiences. But the major goal is for every man out there to be the best version of themselves, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and in all aspects of life. So, in the view of building up a man to be better in all aspects, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I'm bringing up one of my friends because he has been featuring in most of my episodes for now. His name is Victor. He's going to be joining us very soon. Now, we're going to be talking about the psychology of interviewing. Okay, so that's the topic for today. So I'll bring it on very soon. He will introduce himself. Then we'll get right into the topic so that we can, really discuss this and, get all the juicy insights and everything that we need regarding today's topic. So without further delay, I'll be bringing him now. So hello, Victor. Hi. Good day. How are you doing today?
I'm,
Welcome
I'm,
again to New Generation Man. How are you doing?
I'm okay. It's good to be here once again. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So yes, I've already introduced the podcast, and I let them know that we're going to be joining us today to speak on another episode. So that going deep into it, we're going to be talking about the psychology of interviewing. I'm sure over the course of our careers, just between me and you, and things you've heard from people and all that, you've attended a lot of interviews, and you can't have a deep understanding of what the interview process is like and what people should expect. But the way we are going to be talking about it today is kind of a bit different because we're going deep into the psychology of interviewing. What is exactly, from your own thoughts, what is exactly the psychology of interviewing? So, when you say that statement, psychology of interviewing, what comes to
Yeah.
your mind? What does that really mean to you? So, just tell us more about that.
Yeah. So, two words behavior and expectation,
Okay.
right? But
Mm,
before we deep dive into that, my name is Victor Asami. I'm a business
okay.
analyst. And fortunately, not for me, I've been on both sides of the divide. I've
Okay.
interviewed, I've been an interviewer on different occasions, and I've been an interviewee on
Okay.
several other occasions as well. So I'm trying to. My goal is to bring forward my experience and try to help other people with what I've learned, with what I know, and with
Okay.
with tips and techniques that they can actually practice and use, of course.
Okay. Okay. Okay, all right. Thank you again for introducing yourself. But I'm really excited. I really want us to talk about it. Psychology of interviewing. What actually comes to mind? Like, when you think about that.
Yeah, like I said, two words: behavior and expectation. Right. So I'm going to break it into three parts. So
Okay.
first, we're going to look at the interviewer. Second, we're going to look at the interviewee, and third, we're
Okay.
going to look at psychology or
Oh, okay.
psychological techniques. So
Techniques. Okay.
looking at things from the point of view of the interviewer, right? They're expecting the interviewee to make a good first impression, right? They're expecting to see what how you would carry yourself, your confidence, how you would introduce yourself, the way you talk. They just they want to have a good first impression of you, right? Especially from the moment you walk into the room. It's very important for now, looking at things from the interviewer's perspective. Now they want to they want you, even before you open your mouth, they would probably form an impression of you. And another thing to put into consideration is the bias or the prejudice of the interviewers, right? And it's so interesting that I don't want to go into issues such as race or what have you, but there's just some biases. And it's so interesting that there are some prejudices that are unconscious. People, they hold certain prejudices, they hold certain stereotypes, they hold certain biases that it's been part of their life, and it somehow reflects itself subtly, in the way human beings perceive other human beings,
Let's see
right?
whether it might be.
Right. So,
Okay.
so
Sure.
those are the pillars that I want us to look at things from, to look at interviewing from the perspective of the interviewer. And here's what I have to say. As an interviewee, it is your responsibility to make a good first impression. And second of
True.
all, you should try as much as possible not to play into the biases or prejudices of the interviewer. So, first of all, I would say, let me take it one after the other. So, in terms of
Yeah.
first impression, right? Uh, walk in, show respect, have your shoulders high, look confident, right? If you feel it's appropriate to shake hands, do that, but don't be the
Do
one to
that.
stretch your hands first.
Of course.
Keep your hands to yourself. But if the interviewer decides to stretch for their hand, take it and hold it firmly. Hold a firm grip. That's very important. And then ask if you may sit, right? Or if they already tell you, please have a seat, then do that. Have a smile on your face. This subtle nuances, these subtle cues, they go a long way. Okay. And then the second pillar, which is about biases, I would say dress nice. Don't dress too casually, except if
What?
it is stated that you should dress casually or you're allowed to dress casually. Like this popular saying goes, dress the way you want to be addressed, right?
Just,
So it's very important also to dress for the occasion, right? So pay attention to what you're wearing, and I would really suggest, it's highly recommended that you do your research on the panelists or the panel members and have an idea of what they look like, especially their appearance, right? So try to, and maybe their race, maybe the part of the country they're from, or
from
just something that you can take that will make
take.
them feel more, quote and unquote, comfortable with you.
Yeah,
Because
but yeah,
you're
something that should kind of like gauge their personality. Is that what you mean?
something like that. Just put them at
Okay.
ease. That's what I mean. Put them at ease.
Okay.
If you find out about them, you see that this person likes to dress corporate, maybe in their pictures, or you go through their LinkedIn profile, you see that they have I think everybody do try to have a corporate picture on their profile, on their LinkedIn
In your
profile.
profile.
But if you go
Yeah.
through all of their posts, if you're fortunate enough to see some of their pictures, you see what they're wearing, you see other colleagues in that company or the organization, see what they're wearing, see what their disposition is like, whatever it is you're able to gather just through the photos. Try to replicate something like that. Like I said, it's important for you to make them at ease, put them at ease, make them comfortable. And second of all, it's important for you to show that you can easily fit into the company culture. So those are the two pillars that I'm going to be discussing to us today about the interviewer's perspective. First of all is the first impression. Second of all
First
is
impression.
be aware of that people hold biases, people hold certain biases and certain prejudices,
Yeah.
and try as much as possible to turn it in your favor. All right.
Okay.
So that's we're looking at things from the interviewer's perspective. I don't know if
Perspective.
I want to know your thoughts before
Okay.
I talk about
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
interviewer.
I want to jump into that because
Yeah,
the truth is that people are always biased one way or the other. But the thing is that we don't
absolutely.
like to admit it because we always feel, oh, I can be objective. This is work. I need to
Yeah.
put a straight face. But the point is that we always, consciously or subconsciously, there's always a bias. I was just seeing a few days ago on the internet that a guy was trying to sue a particular company because he interviewed with them using a particular name and they did
Hmm.
not call him for the interview. Then he changed his name
I saw
and
that,
he
something
was
like
called
that.
for the interview. Yes, exactly. And he got the same position. Okay. And it was the same person, but a different name. So the reason why he's suing the company is because I'm the same person. Just because I changed my name to something else, you gave me the opportunity. I'm still the same person. So he was able to one way or the other prove that they had a bias because of his name and where he was coming from. So
Yeah.
I know that the narrative is actually changing, but I still feel that there's a lot of work to do when it comes to removing this type of bias. Do you get? And a lot of people have
Absolutely.
to sometimes, especially when you move into a new different country, you might sometimes have to tweak some things about your name. make it short and simple and all that, so as to attract, you know, more interviews and things like that. But the point is that there's always a bias, when it comes to interviewing. And for me, going forward is understand what that bias could be, adjust yourself to, suit into whatever narrative or culture where you find yourself, and just get over it, because
Yeah.
your goal is to actually get a job. Do you understand? Not to say you want to
Not to
change
really
the
prove how
head,
stubborn you are.
not to really prove. Exactly. That's not really your job. Do you understand? That will
Yeah.
eventually change over time. Okay, but for you, your own goal is to actually, just get a job. So I just wanted to add that to what you said. So, but yeah, I think you still have some things to cover about the different aspects of interviewing. So yeah, we can go ahead.
Yeah. So I already we've talked about the interviewer's point of view, or the expectations,
Yes,
or
point of
yeah,
the year.
things that have to do with the interviewer. Now, jumping to the interviewee, yeah, two
Yeah.
things as well that I would like to make mention of. First of all, is as an interviewee, you should know your stuff, do your research about the company, do your research about the position, do your research about the JD, do your research about the culture, whatever it is you can find, as it were. Do your research and know your stuff,
Very
right?
important.
And
Very, very important.
the second pillar is communication. Now, it is, I've heard, I try, because I do prepare people for interviews. So I was having a session with a group of people, preparing them for an interview. It was more of a focus group discussion, by the way. And then one of them made mention of, oh, wow, so all of these things that you're talking about, I know them in my head. But now I realize that it is one thing to know something, it is another thing to be able to communicate
What
what
you
you know,
communicate is as in
right?
that's so true. Mm-hmm.
So it's part of the psychology is for you to know how to pass your message across by knowing your audience, right? I've been on an interview panel where I was the interviewee, where I realized that some of the panelists were not so technical, and I was interviewing for a technical position, you know. And if I was sticking to all of the technical jargons, I would
Jargon, yeah.
lost them, right? I know I would lost them. So I tried, whenever I use a jargon, I explain it. I use I use what's it called?
You
An
explain it in
illustration.
clear terms.
I use an illustration to
Oh,
explain that
illustration.
concept,
Beautiful.
right?
Yeah.
So you identifying your audience, if they're technical, if they're not technical, you should be able to find a balance when you're communicating your points, right? And part of communication also is the way you structure your answers. You don't want it to be vague. You don't want your response to be all over the place. And to be honest, sometime a couple of years back, it's been a long time actually, when I started interviewing, and then I realized that during a particular interview, I was answering the question off point,
Yeah,
you know,
please.
and
Okay.
then I just kept going and going, and then and then I stopped talking, and then I realized, oh my goodness, I didn't actually answer the question. So it's very
Exactly.
important for you to have a structure to answering questions during an interview. And there are some very popular, there are a couple of popular methods on how you can structure your answer. A good example is the STAR method. Another
Yeah,
variation
Sam.
of it is the CAR method. So the STAR method is the situation, task, action, and
Action
results,
and
right?
result.
The CAR method is the challenge, the action, and the results. They're the same thing, it's just some type of variations to it. So you can use whichever one you're comfortable using, so that when you structure when you structure your response, you start
That
with
way.
describing the situation and what was the task at hand, what was required of you to do, and then what did you actually do, which is your
Actually do
action. And after
action
doing all
and
of
result.
this, what were the results, or what was the result, what was the outcome, and that's the R part of it. Same thing goes for the CAR method. What was the challenge? What actions did you take, and what result did you get? And I would like to point out here, because I remember answering one of the questions on LinkedIn collaborative articles where someone asked, how do you, there was a part of it that was talking about using I and we, in an interview, when in your response, while responding to an interview question. And a lot of people would say use I and don't use we, but my response would be use both, but know where to use we and where to use I, right? So if you're using the STAR method, right, you can use we to describe the situation. You can use both we and I to describe the task. But when you're describing the action, you have to personalize it.
Personalize it.
The interviewer is interested in knowing what role did you play, what role did your team play, what role did you and your manager play. No, for the action part, it's strictly a personalized part of the response. So it's very important to identify that. And then for the result, of course, you can use, the result was not just for you, the result was for the team, for the business. So you can use we to answer that part of the question. So that's just what I wanted to point out. So as an interviewee, first of all, know your stuff, do your research, right? And the second pillar is your communication. Your communication style, it has to be effective. Don't go off point. Don't go off topic. And how would you not go off topic? Is by you using structured method,
a structured method
approach, of answering your question.
You know what?
STAR method or CAR method. Yeah, over to you.
Yeah, you know what I want to do? Because that most of the time, a lot of interviewees actually know that, we are supposed to stick to the point, use the STAR method of interviewing, answering your question in a particular manner. Do you understand? But the challenge I also faced recently, and I know happens to a lot of people, is that sometimes, in an interview, the questions they ask you is not something you really prepare for. The only thing maybe you can prepare for is the tell me about yourself question. Every other question is, what you know. Do you understand? And it's what is inside of you that will come out. So the challenge I feel most people have is, once they ask that question, the reason why they kind of go over the place is because they are using that time to think. Do you understand? Of the answer to that question, which is not bad, for you to maybe deviate a bit from what they're asking you, just to kind of gather your thoughts. But the point is, don't allow that time to be too long, because if it's too long, you deviate from the point and they'll be like, oh, what's this person saying? But speaking to your point, having a structure of how to respond also helps, because personally, I would even prefer that you say, oh, okay, a very interesting question. Let me take a moment to think about it. Do you understand? So you can say, okay, I'm trying to think of a scenario that I've experienced so that I can properly explain. It's better for you to say that than to just talk randomly and not make the point. So when you now eventually remember, okay, the example that you would like to use, do you understand? Then you can proceed and say, oh, during the course of my experience working at so, I experienced this particular issue. Then we experienced, like you said, it's the company that had the challenge at the time. We experienced this particular challenge. As the supervisor and manager, I did this and so to make sure that this happened, which resulted in this. And at the end of the day, we had a productive this and that. Do you get? So I also like the point when you made about knowing when to use we and knowing when to use I. Because when you're referring about the company, it's a collective effort, but you need to individualize it and say, what did you do? What was your own contribution to the action that eventually gave the result? So I felt that that particular part was actually spot on, and
as a matter of fact,
it will actually help answer a lot of questions for people that actually have issues in that. So going ahead, moving on. So can you go ahead and
touch on something
tell us about the other aspects? Yes.
Yeah, is it okay to touch on part of the things you mentioned, before we move on. So when you mentioned about you don't
Oh,
really know the exact questions you will be asked in an interview. And I agree with you that
yeah.
you necessarily won't know the particular questions, the specific questions that you'll be asked. But you can
Huh?
anticipate questions from an interview. You can anticipate
True.
questions. Going through the job description, going through the roles that you will be required to perform, you can use that to guide you in anticipating some of the questions that you might encounter. And
Question.
it's very interesting
Yeah.
to also understand that there are you can categorize interview questions. So there are common interview questions. Tell us about yourself. Why do you think you are the best fit for this role? Why should we hire
For
you?
this role.
What's your strengths and your weakness? What's your how did you resolve a conflict? Right. So you have common interview questions, which also you can have behavioral questions. An example of
Yeah.
behavioral question is, tell us about a time you had a conflict and how you
And how
resolved it,
you handle
right?
it. Yeah.
And very interesting these days. They really don't ask you definition questions during
Yeah.
interviews. They ask you mostly scenario-based questions. So
Scenario based. Yes,
all
that's
of
true.
the for in my opinion, for all of the scenario-based questions, train yourself, practice using the STAR method so that whatever question they ask you in your head, you already divided it into four
Four. Yeah.
or into three if you're using the CAR method, right?
Come
So, a good technique would be just like you rightly said, that they might ask you a question and then you need a few seconds to think about it.
Yeah.
Now, one
Yeah.
tip that I would like to share is when you're asked a question and you don't know the answer immediately, just ask the interviewer to repeat the question.
Yes.
Yeah, so while they're repeating it, you're already
Yeah.
thinking about what you're going to say next or where you're going to start your explanation from, right?
Yeah.
I don't buy into the idea of you repeating the question after the interviewer. I don't think so
Okay.
because you're using because the brain power you're using to repeat the question, you could actually be using that brain power to think about what you're going to say by asking the interviewer
Okay.
to repeat the question by
Question.
themselves. Don't do the job for them, right? It's
True.
totally fine to ask them to repeat the question, but good thing is you already heard it. You're already thinking about where you're going to start your response from. So while they are still trying to repeat the question and trying to explain it better, you already know where you want to start from,
Where you have to start from. Okay.
right?
Okay.
And always
That's
start with the situation, with the challenge,
yes,
right?
of course.
And then make sure you mention what you did individually and also the results. And try as much as possible to relate that to the company that you're interviewing, the company that's interviewing you. For example, they ask you a question, you use the STAR method to respond, and then after talking about the results, and you say, I'm willing to bring these skills, this experience over to your company, over to your team, where I can do this, where I can contribute this, and that, right? Because they don't really, as much as they care about what you've done in the past, they are also interested
Past.
in what you're going to do with them, what you're going to do for the company. So you have to find a way to relate your past to your present and to your future, which is the company. Because that means that you're
Yeah.
telling them that you see a future with them, right? So it's very important
Yeah,
to
I
understand
like
this.
the yes, I like the point you just made, and I think I'm really going to take that because most of the time when I am answering interview questions,
Yeah.
I mostly most of the time dwell of the things I've done in the past and how it's relevant to my experience. That's what I say. I don't really tie it into the current role I'm trying to apply for and how it will apply, to what I'm going to do for them. I think that's actually very key because it's not like I didn't know, but it does dawn on me on how important that is
It
Because
is, yes.
yes, you can say all these wonderful things that you've done and all these beautiful experiences that you've had, but how does that
But how does it
translate?
apply to us
Yes,
as a
exactly. How does it
company?
apply to us? How
How
does
does
it
that help
apply
us?
to you?
Yeah.
Exactly, to the job description that was, given to you, and to the, goals and objectives that you understand for other organization, does. Because that also speaks to the points that you said at the beginning about research. The truth is, you cannot really know everything about the company, based on their website and all. And
No.
most of the time, I've noticed it that during the interview, the company also tries to give you a brief breakdown of what their process is, what
Yeah.
they do as a company. Do you understand? And the reason why they do that is because so as to give you insight into how to answer. Do you understand? And
Exactly.
you getting a better understanding of what the company values are, their systems, and what they're trying to achieve. So you being able to, listen actively to what they've said about the company and answer the question, talk about your experience, talk about the value that you bring, but most importantly, translate it into how you are going to be delivering value to the company. So for me, I think that was something very huge. Like I knew it, but I think it really dawned on me on how important that is. So thank you so much for that. So now in rounding up, very interesting conversation, by the way, about the psychology of interviewing. So in rounding up, what are the other tips, and tips and tricks in quotes that you would like people to know, to take note of, and be aware of going forward into interviews?
So I would say try different psychological techniques. For example, you can try mirroring, right? If the and it's a psychological tip or technique. So mirroring is when somebody does something, you do the same thing, hoping that when you do something, they will do the same as well. That might not really explain it, but let me give you an example. So, when an interviewer is asking you questions, or you're having a conversation, and the interviewer does something like this, they scratch their head, you do it as well, right? When they nod, you nod as well. Now, it's a psychological way of being in sync with the other person. And if you're able to achieve that sync, right, the person they get temporarily attached to you. Okay, when they cross their hands, when they cross their arms, you cross. When they do this, you can do it as well. If they do this, you do this as well. So that mirroring is just when they lean forward, you lean forward as well. Right. So it
Interesting.
helps you sync with them. Right. It's a temporary synergy, by the way. But you see, when you do that, it means you're able to capture their attention for the time
Okay.
being. Because you wouldn't want to be answering a question and then the person is dozing off, or the person gets bored with your answer.
But
So
yes,
a
yes,
good
yes.
way to know if you're in sync with someone is to check out if they do what you do, or when they do something, when they make a movement, try to mimic that movement and see if you can get them to be in sync with you. It sounds very crazy, but it works. And another thing I would like to make mention of is they call this the power pose. When you're explaining, hold your hold your let your fingertips touch each other, touch one another, and make this shape and continue speaking. Don't cover your face with it. Do this, continue speaking.
Okay.
Now, it is important that when you are answering a question or when you are talking during an interview, you make your both hands visible, right? But we just don't want you to just lay your arms or your hands on the table and then make use of it. And this, for some reason, it makes people take you more seriously,
Okay.
right? So try to do this and make sure that your both hands are visible at all times. Okay? And talk with confidence. And try as much
Yeah.
as possible not to lean back. In fact, once in a while, lean forward while making your point. Lean
Lean
forward,
forward.
gesticulate, use your
Yes.
hands,
Yes.
gesticulate,
Yes.
and go back to this position intermittently. Gesticulate, go back to this. So what this does, it shows that you're not afraid of them. It shows that you're not hiding anything. It shows that you're comfortable in your own skin, right? And the last but not the least technique, the psychological technique, is storytelling. Everybody loves a good story. We can all relate to stories. So, in your interview, try to tell a story. And how do you tell a story? Just make sure that your story has three structures. There is a beginning, there is a middle, there is an end. Just the same way we talked about the STAR method or the CAR method is the same way you structure
Yeah.
your storytelling. Now, it's very important that in your storytelling, you put a little bit of your personality into it. So, if you're asked about tell me, you ask a question of
I
tell me
agree.
about yourself. Now, I know that there is a structured way, a popular structured way to answer that question. And that popular structured way is
Yeah.
to respond to that question in line with the position that you're applying to, which is great. But you might be at a risk of sounding like a robot. You might be at risk of sounding like you are reading out what you rehearsed, and it might not come off as genuine or authentic. So when you're asked to tell us about yourself, say it in a story, in form of a story. And that story should have a beginning, should have a middle, should have an end. A good example I can think of off the top of my head right now is tell me about yourself. My name is Victor, and I started off my career as a business developer. And I worked my way over the years. I did certifications. I got a master's degree. It was very difficult at the time, but it's one of the things that I'm proud of. It's one of the achievements that I'm proud of to be able to complete a master's in X and X and X field. As a matter of fact, I got an award for this, and this, and this, which has always encouraged me. It motivated me to do X, Y, and Z. I'm a volunteer because I love to help people. I love to empathize with people. And then I did this, volunteered for the old people's homes. I do this and this for them at my spare time. And part of the reasons why I find this position interesting is because it aligns with my career objectives. Personally, I do believe in personal development and personal growth. And so you tell a story and then you round it up by saying, I believe that all of these
Yeah.
skills that I've got, all of these skills and experience that I've had over the years, I believe that I can use that knowledge, I can use those skills to contribute positively into this organization.
Yeah.
Right.
That,
So,
yeah. Yeah.
so
That's
make it
totally.
a story. Start with, my name is this and this. I started as, or my career started as, or um, uh, years back in the early days of my career, in the early years of my career. So have a start, have a middle, where you can bring in some of the highlights of the things you are proud of, or achievements you're proud of, and then you round it up by letting the interviewer know how all of these interesting things about you can contribute positively to the company. So even when
Okay.
you're answering a question of, so how did you tell us about a time you dealt with uh,
With-
a difficult customer, for example? I've heard that question a couple of times.
Yeah.
How did you deal with a difficult customer or a difficult client? You know, you can tell a story instead of in that regard, because STAR method is it's okay to use it. I'm just saying that you
Yeah.
can spice it up by telling a story around it. And one of the things I do when I'm answering interview question is to say, so let's use an example. Tell us about a time that you had to deal with a difficult customer or a difficult client. And I'll say, oh,
Mm-hmm.
over the years, I've dealt with several difficult clients in my role
Right.
as a business analyst.
So
I
like,
remember a
mm-hmm.
particular situation or a particular experience that stood out for me was when a particular customer didn't get their delivery on time, or when a particular
Mm-hmm.
customer wasn't, when particular stakeholders, now in the case of a business analyst, particular stakeholders didn't agree
Hold on.
with the course of action or didn't agree with the recommendation given by other stakeholders because they had uh, some unresolved personal issues, and the personal issues was affecting decision making, and it was also affecting my deliverables. I tried to resolve it, but it didn't work out. So what I eventually did was to talk to so and so person and came up with a facilitation, came up with a workshop idea where all of the stakeholders were invited. We served tea. We made sure it was a conducive and a comfortable environment, and then we tried to resolve the situation, employing certain conflict resolution techniques. At the end of the day, we realized that it was more of a personal issue than professional issue. So we introduced a couple more experts to help diffuse and resolve the personal issue that was affecting the professional issue. So it's about a story, because just imagine the interviewer listening to you. Everybody likes a good gist, isn't it? So when you talk about those difficult clients, like you were telling a story, you talk about it like you're
Mm-hmm.
telling a story. It's more
Yeah,
interesting,
that's
and
yeah to listen
it's
to.
make sure it's easy for them to follow from start. Okay, so this
Very
was
important.
what how it started. This was what happened, and this was what later happened. This was how it was resolved. This was everybody likes a good gist, so it's very important in your technique for interviewing.
Interesting points, interesting conversation. Thank you so much for all the points that you've raised. But in rounding up, there was something else I was just wanting to add is that when it comes to interviews, it's always also nice to also ask questions because it also makes you know that okay, you're also intentional about yourself and that you are concerned about the role, how you fit into the role, and ask details about what the role is about. Well, for me, one important question I try to ask is because for every job there's a probation period. It could be 6 months, it could be 3 months. So one
Could
question
be
that I
one
always
month.
try, it could be 1 month. So what question I always try to ask is at the end of 2 months, at the end of 3 months, depending on the probation period, what are the key changes you like to see in organizations, or what would success for me in this role be like? Do you
Yeah.
understand? That way, you're already seeing yourself as part of the organization, and you're also concerned about how your actions or the things you're going to implement is going to deliver results. Because for me, I think that's an excellent question to always ask because you don't want to get into a role without actually knowing what success or
Would look like.
the
Yeah.
results it would look like in a role. So for me, I think that's a very, very important question to ask at the end of an interview because most of the times you always ask if you have questions. So I think that's a very good question to ask to show that you have deep understanding of what the role is about and you are clear on expectations even at the beginning of the job. So
Absolutely.
there are no confusions in the middle and things like that. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much for the time. Like this was really rich. We did have a lot of points, a lot of insights about the psychology of interviewing, and I know that people are going to actually learn a lot from this. Okay, thank you so much, Victor, for making out the time, and
Thank you for
for
having me.
everyone, yes, and for everyone that's going to watch this episode. Thank you so much for tuning to New Generation Man again. So feel free to share this video with your family and friends and anybody that you know maybe is currently job hunting and looking for and is interviewing currently. I think some of the tips here will definitely help them because we mentioned a lot of things. So one or two tips that we spoke about here will definitely help their interview journey and eventually help them to land that dream job. Thank you so much again, and we'll definitely do this again very very soon. All right. Cheers, guys. Bye.